You might have seen it in your local bookstore. Those perfectly curated book stands with a sign that reads #BookTok or as seen on BookTok. On it is a plethora of cute, vibrant covers that grab your attention and leave you thinking, maybe I should read that. If you're watching this and you have no idea what I'm talking about, BookTok is a hashtag on TikTok that, as of this year, has amassed over 370 billion views. At the core of BookTok is a community of like-minded individuals who've played a massive role in how literature is perceived and distributed. In 2019, the year before the pandemic started, 697.31 million printed books were sold in the United States, which saw a huge spike in 2021 with 837.66 million units sold. Although this number has decreased since then, the number remains significantly higher than units sold pre-pandemic. If you're on BookTok, you might have noticed a lot of book recommendations in the young adult, romance, and adult fantasy genre, which makes sense given that the main demographic of people who are on TikTok, and especially those who post book content, are teens and young adults. BookTok has fostered a community of devoted fans that have helped create buzz for both up-and-coming and old releases. A book like The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller achieved New York Times bestselling status with its release in 2011, only to resurge back into the number one spot in 2021, almost a decade after its initial release. With all the traction that BookTok has gotten over the past few years, it should come as no surprise that with all the positivity to come out of this online space, it has also brought about a lot of online discussion.
Become increasingly aware of within the BookTok community over the last year is the terrifyingly swift growth of anti-intellectualism, which is just eclipsed.
I saw someone on BookTok say that they skip over long paragraphs, like they just won't read it. Honestly, to each their own, but this is why BookTok gets a bad rap. Because how are you a reader? But
How do book influencers make you want to pick up their latest read? Is it the optics of looking at a pastel cover paired with words of flattery from the reviewer? If I had a minute to sell a book to you, I might tell you it's a slow burn, friends to enemies to friends to lovers, with a happily ever after ending that ties everything up nicely. Does it sound more enticing now? Prior to its use on BookTok, tropes were heavily used on platforms like Archive of Our Own and Wattpad, two major fanfiction websites that use tagging systems to specialize the user's search. There's definitely been more of an emphasis on using tropes to promote books, using key buzzwords to gain attention from a wandering eye. The strategy has become so big on the platform that even publishing companies and authors use this to their advantage as well. Those in the book industry are well aware that there's a big pool of readers who are inclined to pick up a read if it has a sense of familiarity, which is something that tropes communicate in a straightforward manner. I want to stress, though, that there's no issue in reading books with these tropes in them. I myself have indulged in many books with classic tropes you can probably think of right now and have absolutely loved them. But having books recommended based solely off of tropes can be reductive and take away from the actual content of the book itself. The popularity of tropes can also make it more difficult for books that don't fit these generic descriptions to gain appeal. In the article The Tropification of Fiction by Camilla Beck-Bossanova, she describes a lack of clear communication, the reduction of complex ideas to bite-sized tropes, and the focus of social media virality to have set the stage for a world where storytelling doesn't matter as much as scratching the reader's pre-existing itch. The immediate thought that comes into my mind, which was also an example Beck-Bossanova used, is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. It Ends With Us saw a huge surge in popularity in the BookTok space, being pushed forward as a must-read romance novel. Categorizing the book into the romance genre unfortunately gives a lot of readers, especially young ones, the wrong idea of what this book is about. Thus, the seriousness of themes discussed, such as abuse and domestic violence, are glossed over. In addition to shaping ideas of intimacy, the thought that books are a commodity is becoming more prevalent within the BookTok space. Social media is the gas to the flame of consumerism. Maybe you've seen those massive clothing hauls on TikTok. Spend $500+ with me at this store, clothing hauls for every occasion, and $1,000+ back to school haul, and it's the exact same way with BookTok. There is a recurring cycle of what reads are new and trendy, feeding directly into the constant consumption of books. In a few months' time, or even less than that, the newest BookTok obsession will be overturned by another viral read. With this has arisen concern that readers aren't reading anymore. They just want to uphold the aesthetic of reading. When referring to the reading aesthetic, you may imagine well-kept bookshelves that are color-coded from top to bottom and organized by genre. Or it might be your favorite celebrity walking down the street paired with a matcha, sunglasses, and a book in hand or even in their back pocket, sparking online debate on whether or not they're using book stylists to curate their latest read. Clearly, there's a lot of facets to what exactly this aesthetic can be defined as. The first example of this appearance that comes to mind is dark academia, an online aesthetic that's been popularized by BookTok in the past few years. In addition to staples like tweed blazers and turtlenecks, dark academia places an emphasis on classic literature, education, history, and philosophy, with a focus on themes such as morality and elite societies. With the prominence of academic life in this aesthetic, the heart of dark academia lies in the romanticization of intellectual pursuits. Olivia Sophie Schäfer contends that while dark academia does present a romanticized version of academia, it simultaneously reduces academic engagement to superficial aesthetics and symbols rather than encouraging deeper intellectual engagement. These symbols Schäfer refers to are books filled with annotations and color-coded tabs, special editions with a color-sprayed edge and an updated cover, and bookshelves that are arranged in a way that maximizes visual appeal. While readers on BookTok often engage with books in a way that's surface level, as in doing a quick review that simply recaps the book, hauls, and showcasing visual markers of being a reader, this is a format that is most aptly fitted the model of short-form content that TikTok prioritizes. Still, this has stirred up a skeptic attitude towards those who are more focused on quote-unquote looking the part of being a reader. In a GQ article by Barry Pierce, he comments on the upkeep of the reader aesthetic, quote, "With all this effort being put into being seen as a reader, one wonders how any of them have the time to read." There's an assumption that to aestheticize reading automatically equates to not being a real reader, and I find this to be very flawed thinking. There's only one qualification to being a reader, and that's, you guessed it, reading a book. The method of reading and decisions made on what to do with your books after the fact are individual choices that don't take away from the validity of saying you read a book, except in the case where one is actively trying to restrict their reading abilities. Earlier last year, there was a now-deleted TikTok posted by @probablyoffreading, where she explains that if she sees a paragraph this big, she's skipping it. This isn't the only video that's been created in a similar fashion. More videos have resurfaced of other creators sharing similar sentiments, how they skip paragraphs to read dialogue, or when they find the content of the book boring.
Why the fuck is this book? First of all, the writing is so tiny. Second of all, why are the pages so filled with so many words? Like, what the fuck? I like pages that aren't filled with this many words. Like, literally every page is like, look at this! Are you fucking kidding me?
Raise your hand if you've skimmed through text before. Yeah, I would be guilty if I said I've never skimmed through anything before, and honestly, I don't see an inherent issue with it, but there is a discernible line drawn when skimming eventually inhibits a reader's ability to comprehend information from a book. Skimming can be used to gain a general idea of what's ahead, or to quickly read a part of the book that doesn't add a lot of substance or that you're not particularly interested in, like an overly descriptive image of the setting the character is in. This is a technique that, when used wisely, can still give the reader an effective understanding of the storyline, but in excess seems pointless. Skimming can easily become skipping, and if large bits of the text are purposefully omitted, the book isn't really being read. And in the extreme cases that were previously mentioned, where one may choose to only read dialogue or become very selective with the text they do read, skimming becomes detrimental to one's understanding, giving the reader an experience that's closer to reading the synopsis or a plot summary rather than the actual book itself. Behaviors like this make up the grounds for all of the anti-intellectual discourse on BookTok, but before I go into further depth, let's define our terms. Coined by historian Richard Hofstadter, anti-intellectualism is defined as a resentment and suspicion of the life of the mind and of those who are considered to represent it, and a disposition to constantly minimize the value of that life. When referring to the life of the mind, Hofstadter refers to intellectual thought or the ability to think critically about situations or problems and draw conclusions about or develop solutions for them. This resentment can manifest as a rejection of factual evidence, as well as viewing those deemed to be intellects as snobbish and pretentious because of a belief that the quote-unquote plain sense of the common man is an altogether adequate substitute for, if not actually much superior to, formal knowledge and expertise. It will always be important to think critically and, if the means are available, encourage others to do so as well. Critical thinking is a method of both analysis and evaluation that helps one to make informed judgments and decisions, inciting a thoughtful mind and meaningful learning. This is an ability that is transferable to virtually any aspect of life, and reading is one tool that can enhance it. Reading is beneficial for a multitude of different reasons, including but not limited to an exposure to a vast array of ideas, cultures, behaviors, and vocabulary, all of which can improve critical thinking in the long run. With people whose only interaction with books is in school, thoughts surrounding reading might be that it's not exciting or entertaining, it's just boring. Dominic Pino comments on his own experience with reading, saying that reading is not something you do for yourself and for your own intellectual development. It's something you do for someone else to check boxes on a rubric. We shouldn't be surprised that when kids grow up and the teacher and rubric aren't there, they don't feel the desire to read. Though Pino's take on reading is anecdotal, he proposes a possible reason behind why there's been a decline in teens and adults who read in their free time. In a recent study, findings show that from a pool of around 240,000 individuals who completed the American Time Use Survey from 2003 to 2023, there has been a decline in reading for pleasure, with peaks showing in 2004 with 28% of participants and lows in 2023 with 16% of participants. This information can be combined with findings from previous studies that suggest a downward trend has been in effect as early as the 1940s. Reading for entertainment is not a new phenomenon. In fact, BookTok thrives off of churning out quick, exciting reads. However, with all of the discourse on the platform, this act in itself can be seen as anti-intellectual, as opposed to reading that is purposefully critical in thought and analysis. This assessment is quite unfair, and if anything, continues to deter people from reading by creating this almost elitist culture around it and saying that one form of reading is better than the other. Here's my anecdotal take on this. So later into my reading journey, I really started getting into classic literature, and this was also around the same time I started reading classics in school too. So because my first introduction of classics was in a classroom, I had to have this heavily analytical mindset when reading them, and that's something I definitely struggled with at first, at least comprehending the material and applying my own original thoughts to it. Classic novels tend to be harder to read. The writing style is more traditional, and sometimes there can be historical context that makes it a bit confusing the first time around, but the only way that I adapted was to read more. And this doesn't mean I was breezing through the collections of Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. I was actually reading a lot of those really popular books that were, and still are, being pushed by BookTokers. Think Cassie Clare, Leigh Bardugo, Sally Rooney. From my perspective, it became easier to digest any book, comprehend the material, and apply critical thought when I did any reading. Truthfully, I think all reading is good reading, and non-readers are not going to become readers if they feel forced to jump straight into a long and daunting novel like War and Peace, for example. Reading is a skill, not a natural-born ability. In an article by Rose Horowitz, Columbia professor Nicholas Dames explains that his students have become increasingly overwhelmed by the assigned reading they're required to do. He recounts an interaction with a student where she explains that she had never been required to read an entire book in high school. It is implied by Horowitz that the reasoning behind individuals who struggle to read lies within a failed responsibility in school systems and its curriculum. While I hesitate to take this article at face value since the evidence was not formally extrapolated, what we can assert the validity of is data relating to literacy. From the U.S. Department of Education through its National Center for Education Statistics, as of 2023, 28% of adults in the U.S. ranked at the lowest levels of literacy, approximately a third grade reading level, compared to 19% in 2017. These findings emphasize the importance of reading and to welcome the act no matter what level it's at. However, this does not mean that the purposeful ignorance of the media you're consuming should be encouraged, or that we should be straying away from being critical as well. Liking a book, or really anything in general, does not make it exempt from criticism, either from those around you or even you yourself. Yes, you can still be critical of the things you like. Being partial to something does not mean it's without flaw. And yet, the response to critiques around popular, well-liked novels is not always met with open arms. If you've ever heard of the phrase, "let people enjoy things," you might be familiar with the comic by Adam Ellis, where this originates from. One of the characters begins to make a comment about the football game that's being played, to which the other responds, "let people enjoy things." There was an obvious attempt to be condescending and attack the actual person watching the game by making a mockery of him. Similarly, where this phrase is usually used is when something is popular, be it a book, TV show, movie, even a hobby. You will hear a lot of criticism that is actually made in bad faith, where the item of question is looked down upon simply because of its popularity and not because the critic has any real knowledge or experience to base their comments off of. In this case, defense is warranted and understandable, compared to responses of the same nature that are used when the criticism is actually valid. Esther Rosenfield suggests that this is due to an insecurity within the person that holds the opinion. Quote, "If you hold an opinion about a movie, why should reading an opposing one make you feel bad? Unless, of course, you're not secure in your own opinion. Unless you feel there's some truth in those opposing arguments." Art, even good art, is not perfect. In fact, being able to criticize literature can help build a deeper level of appreciation for it and make improvement possible. Fernando Gross, a London-based writer, notes that we are drowning in content and lacking conversations about that content that rise above the nuance-free shouting matches that dominate a lot of online spaces. In terms of a genre such as romance, of which is at the forefront of the BookTok space, past the happily ever afters and cheesy dialogue, there's a push and pull between deeming romance novels as cringe and vapid, or as a form of escapism that can offer readers a heightened sense of comfort and happiness. To some, reading a romance novel means engaging with a trashy book and bad writing. When the argument starts to shift away from, "I don't like this book because I had a bad experience with it," to, "yeah, romance books suck just because," the claims held against the genre become less credible and hold little merit, which is the kind of situation Ellis's comic describes. Books in this genre from the likes of Emily Henry, Ellie Hazelwood, and Christina Lauren are the types of books that are often discounted as not being challenging or intellectually stimulating enough for your average reader. However, the learning that comes from reading is not solely attributed to the type of book, but the way one reads as well. As put by Rachitha Richuri, there are several interpretations of a single piece of writing that can be read and comprehended, and some of them may appear to be very different from one another. Hence, the learner is instructed to maintain an open mind towards many points of view. As a result, not only is the ability to think critically put to use, but the virtue of open-mindedness is as well. The thing is, this attitude of open-mindedness and critical thought can be used when reading any book, but is associated more with older, dated literature, which is likely due to the prevalence of classics and books of the like in academic settings. All in all, exposure to reading, and especially a diverse selection of books, aids one's understanding of cultural values, other worldviews, and makes the most of the ability to be a critical thinker, which is not limited to one type of book. Despite all of my qualms with BookTok, I am very glad that there's an online space that gives readers the opportunity to share opinions and give recommendations. Although, like I mentioned, some content on BookTok can be harmful, especially towards younger audiences, as a whole, I see BookTok as being a net positive thing, having pulled a lot of people, including myself, back into reading because I truly don't think I ever would have picked up a book outside of school had it not been for BookTok. It's been instrumental in not only helping to create a bigger community of readers, but also for authors to gain reach and increase sales with their books, even if they don't already have an established fan base. Reading is cool, it's fun, it's beneficial even if done passively, and I think it's great that BookTok has made many others come to that realization as well. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say as of now. If you guys have any other thoughts, leave them down below. But other than that, I will see you guys next time. Bye!